Human steadies alien girl in a gravity slip, watching time fracture only around human. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to our main character. The air around Commander Ryan Walker was thick with tension. His boots crunched against the hard surface of the alien station, each step reverberating through the cold, metallic corridors. He had been to many worlds, faced many threats, but this one felt different. As part of a security team tasked with protecting an alien ambassador, Ryan had seen things beyond human comprehension, but nothing prepared him for this moment. The station's artificial gravity control malfunctioned with a violent shudder, throwing everything into chaos. The air was suddenly thick with panic as his team scrambled to regain control. Ryan's eyes locked on a figure in the distance, Elira, a tall, striking alien woman with luminous green skin and glowing orange eyes. She was one of the representatives from the planet Zenthra, a species known for their advanced technology and vast knowledge of the cosmos. But now, she was losing her footing, her body drifting helplessly as the gravity slip took over. Time itself seemed to bend around her. Ryan's training kicked in. He pushed through the chaos, his eyes never leaving her as she twisted and turned in midair. Her body was suspended in the shifting gravity, and Ryan, focused and determined, reached her just in time, grabbing her by the waist and steadying her as the gravity fluctuated. The moment they made contact, something strange happened. It was as if the universe itself had paused for a brief moment, the space around them distorting. Time seemed to fracture, slowing down, compressing everything except for Ryan. Elira's body, still suspended, moved in slow motion, while Ryan's movements were perfectly in sync with the environment. The world around them blurred, the only clear thing being the rapid beat of Ryan's heart and the look of awe in Elira's glowing eyes. What's happening? She gasped, her voice trembling as the moment seemed to stretch for eternity. Ryan didn't know how to answer. He didn't have time for answers. The gravity slip was still wreaking havoc on the station, and it was up to him to keep them both safe. He tightened his grip around her, his mind racing. Every second counted, but in that strange, fractured moment, it felt as though time was both infinite and fleeting. His breath slowed, his thoughts sharpened. "We need to move, now," Ryan finally said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. Elira nodded, the shock in her eyes giving way to determination. Together, they moved through the crumbling station, defying the strange forces that sought to tear them apart. Ryan's mind never stopped racing, calculating every move, every danger that lay ahead. But in the back of his mind, the strange distortion in time lingered, a reminder that even in the most chaotic of moments, the human spirit could remain unshaken. Ryan's heart raced as he and Elira moved swiftly through the unstable corridors of the alien station. The metallic floor beneath them trembled with the shock waves of the gravity malfunction, each step sending ripples through the tense silence. Elira, though still slightly unbalanced from the slip, moved with surprising agility, her glowing skin flickering as the light from the broken panels above them cast fleeting shadows on her. Ryan's instincts told him to stay close, to keep her safe, but the sense of urgency surged within him as the sound of distant alarms echoed through the halls. "We need to get to the control room," Ryan said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. Elira glanced at him, her orange eyes sharp with a mixture of confusion and concern. "Control room? Why?" she asked, her voice slightly strained. "To fix this mess before it gets worse. The gravity's only going to keep getting worse, and if we don't act now, we'll be stuck here." The gravity around them shifted again, and the floor beneath them buckled, sending them both sliding toward the edge of a crumbling corridor. Ryan grabbed Elira's arm just in time, pulling her back to safety as the world tilted around them. He could feel the strain of the malfunction pulling at his muscles, each step becoming more difficult as if the very fabric of time and space was warping with every moment they spent there. "I didn't expect this," Elira murmured, her breath shallow. The station was supposed to be stable. How is this happening? Ryan didn't have an answer. He could feel the strain on his own body, the disorienting sensation of time flickering in and out of sync with each passing second. "We don't have time for answers," he said, his grip tightening as they moved forward. "We just need to survive." They reached the control room door, its surface cracked and glowing faintly from within. Ryan stepped forward, punching in the access code he'd been given when he arrived, praying it would still work. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing a mess of flickering screens and damaged consoles. Sparks crackled from the ceiling above, the hum of the failing systems filling the room. Elira's eye scanned the room, her alien senses taking in the damage with a quick, assessing look. "This looks bad," she said, her voice tense. "We can't fix it from here." Ryan shook his head, frustration mounting. "We don't have a choice. We need to try." He stepped to the nearest console, his fingers flying over the controls. But the screens remained blank, unresponsive. "It's no use," he muttered, slamming a fist against the panel. "The main systems are down. We need to find another way." Elira moved closer, her presence almost calming amidst the chaos. "There is another way," she said quietly, her voice soft yet determined. Ryan turned to her, his brow furrowing. "What do you mean?" "I have access to the backup systems, but they're hidden. It's not easy to get to them." Ryan's mind raced. "How hidden?" "Deep within the core of the station. The central hub," Elira explained, her eyes narrowing with concentration. "If we can get there, I can bypass the system lockdown." Ryan's heart skipped a beat. The core of the station was a dangerous place to be, a place few had access to. But if that was their only option, he would follow Elira to the ends of the universe. "Lead the way," he said, his voice resolute. Without another word, Elira moved toward the back of the control room, her steps sure and focused. Ryan followed closely behind, the gravity shifting again, this time throwing them both into a quick stumble. He caught himself, but the feeling of instability was relentless, like the very station was being pulled apart. Elira reached a hidden hatch in the floor, pressing a series of buttons to unlock it. The hatch opened with a soft hiss, revealing a narrow tunnel descending into the station's depths. "After you," Ryan said, a smile tugging at his lips despite the situation. Elira shot him a brief look, her expression unreadable. "Stay close," she warned, stepping into the darkened tunnel. Ryan followed, his every sense on high alert as they descended into the unknown, the fate of the station, and their lives, hanging in the balance. The tunnel grew darker as Ryan and Elira descended deeper into the heart of the station. The air was thick with the hum of failing systems, the distant crackling of damaged circuits echoing through the narrow passage. Every step was careful, the gravity fluctuation making the ground beneath them feel unsteady, as though the entire station was slowly tipping out of balance. Ryan's hand grazed the wall as they moved, the cold metal vibrating beneath his fingers. Elira's pace was steady, her alien senses guiding her through the darkness with an ease that left Ryan both impressed and uneasy. "How far are we from the core?" Ryan asked, his voice cutting through the eerie silence of the tunnel. Elira glanced back, her face illuminated by the faint glow of the emergency lights. "Not far now. Just a few more levels. Stay close." Ryan nodded, his eyes scanning the shadows around them. The quiet tension in the air seemed to stretch for miles, the only sound their footsteps and the occasional groan of the station's walls. They reached another door, this one larger, built to withstand the pressure of the core's immense power. Elira approached it, running her fingers over a panel beside the door. The screen flickered to life, casting a soft light on her face. "This is it," she murmured. "Once we go in, we can't turn back." Ryan's pulse quickened, but he didn't hesitate. "Let's do it." Elira pressed a series of buttons, and the door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a vast chamber filled with glowing machinery and thick cables running along the walls like veins. The core was a complex labyrinth of technology, far beyond anything Ryan had ever seen. He stepped inside, his boots clicking against the smooth floor as Elira led the way. The room was alive with the sounds of crackling energy, the hum of power surging through the ancient systems. It was clear that the station was old, its systems barely holding together under the strain. Elira moved to the central console, her eye scanning the various readouts as she worked quickly. Ryan stood guard nearby, his eyes never straying far from her, watching the shadows shift around them. "I'm bypassing the lockdown now," Elira said, her voice focused. "We don't have much time. The systems are unstable, and the longer we stay here, the more dangerous it gets." Ryan nodded, but his mind raced. The idea of being trapped in this failing station, surrounded by collapsing systems, was starting to feel more real with every passing second. "How long do we have?" he asked, stepping closer to the console. Elira glanced up at him, her expression unreadable. "Not long. If the core destabilizes, it could take out the entire station. We need to get the systems back online, or we're not leaving." Ryan's stomach churned at the thought, but he pushed the fear aside. "Do what you need to do. I'll cover you." Elira nodded, her hands moving faster now as she worked to stabilize the core's failing systems. The lights flickered, casting long shadows across the room as the temperature in the chamber began to drop. Ryan felt the cold creeping into his bones, the sensation of time warping again around him, as if the very fabric of reality was starting to unravel. The gravity shifted once more, this time with more intensity. Ryan's feet barely held onto the ground as the room around him tilted. "We have to hurry," Elira said, her voice tight. "It's starting." Ryan clenched his jaw, his eyes fixed on the alien woman at the console. She was his only hope now. If she couldn't fix this, they would both be trapped here, lost to the depths of space. He couldn't let that happen. With his heart racing and the station around them groaning with the strain of its unstable systems, Ryan stepped forward, prepared to do whatever it took to keep them both alive. Elira's hands moved with precision, her focus absolute as she worked to override the system's final lockdown. Every moment felt like a lifetime, the air thick with tension. Then, with a soft beep, the console flashed green, signaling a successful override. Elira exhaled sharply, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "It's done," she said, turning to face Ryan. But the relief was short-lived. The station systems began to stabilize, but the gravity fluctuations and time distortion still lingered in the air, leaving Ryan feeling disoriented and unsure of what to expect next. The station systems flickered to life, a soft hum filling the air as the gravity fluctuations began to stabilize. Ryan steadied himself, his feet firm on the ground once more, though the strange sensation of time still seemed to linger at the edge of his perception. Elira, still standing at the console, exhaled slowly, wiping a bead of sweat from her forehead. The intense focus in her eyes softened, but only for a moment. "We did it," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Ryan nodded, but his attention remained fixed on the strange hum that filled the room. The core's power had been restored, but something still felt off. "Yeah, we did," he said, though his voice held an edge of uncertainty. "But I still don't feel safe. This place, it's still unstable." Elira turned away from the console, her eyes scanning the room as if she too could feel the dissonance in the air. "You're right. We've only stabilized the systems for now. We need to leave before the damage becomes irreparable." Ryan looked at her, his expression firm. "Then we move out. I'm not letting you stay here any longer than necessary." Elira met his gaze, her features unreadable for a moment before she gave him a small, determined nod. "Agreed. Let's get to the exit." They moved toward the door, Elira leading the way. As they walked, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. The station was eerily silent now, its once vibrant hum replaced by an unnatural stillness. He glanced over at Elira, but she seemed unaffected, focused on the task ahead. As they reached the hall that would take them toward the exit, Ryan heard a low, almost imperceptible sound, like a whisper carried on the wind. He froze for a moment, his hand instinctively reaching for the weapon at his side. "Did you hear that?" he asked, his voice low. Elira stopped and turned back to him, her expression unchanged. "No. What did you hear? A whisper. Like something, was trying to get my attention. Ryan's eye scanned the darkened corridor, but there was nothing out of the ordinary. Elira glanced down the hall, then shook her head. You're imagining things. The station systems are still recovering from the overload. It's probably just a glitch in the sound systems. Ryan didn't respond, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. He pushed the thought aside, refocusing on their mission. Let's move, he said, stepping forward. They continued down the hall, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The lights overhead flickered erratically as they approached the final security door, the only barrier between them and freedom. Elira moved to the control panel and began typing quickly, her fingers flying over the keys. The door responded with a low hum as the system unlocked. Almost there, she muttered, not looking up. But just as the door began to open, a sudden vibration rippled through the station, knocking both of them off balance. Ryan reached out to steady himself, his heart racing as the lights flickered violently above them. What the hell is going on? He asked, his voice rising with urgency. Elira's face was pale, her eyes wide with shock. This isn't a glitch, she said, her voice trembling. The cause instability, it's getting worse. The whole station is about to collapse. Ryan's mind raced as the reality of the situation hit him. They had to move fast, or they would be trapped here forever. We need to get out, now, he said, his voice a command. Elira nodded, her resolve hardening as she pushed the door fully open. Beyond it, a narrow escape tunnel stretched into the darkness, the only way out. Without hesitation, Ryan and Elira dashed into the tunnel, the door slamming shut behind them with a deafening clang. As they sprinted through the narrow passage, Ryan could hear the sounds of the station breaking down around them. The walls shook violently, and the ground beneath their feet seemed to tremble with each step. Ryan's breath came in ragged gasps as he pushed himself harder, determined to get Elira to safety. The tunnel stretched on endlessly, the sound of their footsteps the only thing keeping them grounded in the chaos. How much farther? Ryan asked, his voice strained. Not far, Elira replied, her voice tight with fear. We just need to reach the escape pod bay. It's our only chance. They rounded a corner, and Ryan caught a glimpse of the escape pods in the distance. But before they could reach them, the tunnel suddenly collapsed behind them with a deafening roar. Dust and debris rained down, blocking their path. No! Ryan shouted, his heart pounding as he turned back to Elira. We're trapped! Elira grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the only other exit. This way, she yelled. They ran, pushing through the chaos as the station around them continued to break apart. Ryan's muscles burned with effort, but he didn't stop. Not until they reached the last door, the final barrier between them and the unknown. Elira punched in the access code, and the door slid open with a soft hiss. The escape pod bay was just ahead. But as they stepped inside, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. As Ryan and Elira stepped into the escape pod bay, the reality of their situation hit them all over again. The station, once a marvel of engineering, was now a crumbling relic of a lost cause. Sparks flew from damaged panels overhead, casting quick, jagged shadows across the dimly lit room. The soft hum of the emergency lights was the only sound keeping the silence at bay, but it wasn't enough to drown out the rumbling vibrations beneath their feet, as if the station itself was struggling to stay intact. Ryan's gaze shifted rapidly from one pod to another. Each one was sealed, but the bay's lights were flickering, and the countdown clock displayed a low, steady number. Time was running out. We need to move fast, Ryan said, his voice tight as he reached for the nearest escape pod. Elira nodded, her brow furrowed with worry, but she didn't waste time. She sprinted toward a pod near the back, her quick, graceful movements cutting through the chaos of the room. Ryan followed close behind, every sense on alert. The air was thick with the stench of burning circuitry, and the ground beneath them seemed to sway as the station's integrity continued to weaken. They reached the pod, but just as Elira reached for the control panel, a loud, shrill alarm rang out. The lights overhead blinked violently, and the floor beneath them trembled again, even harder this time. Ryan's heart raced as he turned toward the source of the sound. "What is it?" he asked, his voice rising with panic. Elira's eyes widened in horror as she read the flashing warning on the pod screen. "The system is locking down the pods. They're not releasing unless we override the central command." Ryan's stomach dropped. "Is there another way?" he asked. "No. Not unless we access the main terminal." "But it's at the opposite end of the station," Elira said, her voice calm despite the urgency of the situation. "That's too far." "We don't have time," Ryan replied, his mind racing. He could feel the gravity fluctuations worsening, and every second they stayed in this room felt like an eternity. Elira's face softened as she looked at him, her expression full of determination. "Then we make time," she said firmly. Without waiting for a response, Elira turned, running toward the only exit of the pod bay, the one that led back through the darkened corridors to the main control room. Ryan hesitated for a fraction of a second, then followed her. The hallway seemed endless as they ran, the walls shaking with each tremor that passed through the station. The air was growing colder, and Ryan could feel the temperature dropping with each step. The flickering lights cast long, eerie shadows as they navigated the twists and turns of the deteriorating station. Time seemed to slow again, the seconds stretching out unnaturally as the reality of their situation settled deeper into Ryan's bones. They reached a narrow door near the end of the corridor, the only barrier between them and the main terminal. Elira rushed to the door, her fingers moving over the panel with practiced ease. Ryan stood back, his eyes scanning the hall behind them. There was no sign of danger yet, but the tension in the air was palpable. "Hurry," Ryan urged, his voice low. "We're running out of time." Elira nodded without a word, her face set in concentration as she worked on the control panel. After what felt like an eternity, the door slid open with a low hiss, revealing a dark, quiet room beyond. The terminal was in the center, surrounded by blinking screens and the faint glow of emergency power. Ryan's heart hammered in his chest as they entered, the weight of the situation settling heavily on his shoulders. Elira went straight to the terminal, her hands moving quickly as she bypassed the system lockout. Ryan stayed alert, his gaze darting around the room, waiting for anything to go wrong. But the room remained eerily still, the only sound the clicking of Elira's fingers on the keys. "Got it," Elira said, her voice filled with relief. "The pods are now releasing. We're good to go." Ryan felt a rush of adrenaline surge through him as he turned toward the door. "Let's move," he said, his voice urgent. They made their way back to the escape pod bay, Ryan's mind racing with every step. The station was falling apart faster than they could move, and every second felt like a battle. When they arrived, the pods were open, the countdown clock still ticking steadily. Without a word, they climbed into the nearest pod. Ryan strapped himself in, his eyes fixed on Elira as she did the same. The doors of the pod sealed shut with a soft hiss, and the countdown continued. It was a race against time now. Ryan took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest. The pod began to lift off, the hum of the engines vibrating through his bones as the station's gravity slipped away. They were leaving the dying station behind, but the uncertainty of the universe still loomed ahead. Elira looked over at him, her face tired but resolute. "We made it," she said quietly. Ryan nodded, but he couldn't shake the feeling that their journey was just beginning. The escape pod hurtled through the darkness of space, its engines humming steadily as the station they had narrowly escaped from faded into the distance. Ryan sat strapped into his seat, his mind still racing with the chaos they had left behind. The image of the collapsing station, its systems failing and gravity spiraling out of control, was burned into his memory. Elira, sitting beside him, stared out the small window, her face illuminated by the faint light of distant stars. The tension that had gripped them inside the station was gone, but a new weight settled in the air between them. They had survived, but what now? The silence stretched on, neither of them speaking for several minutes. Finally, Elira broke the stillness. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice carrying a deep sincerity. Ryan turned to her, surprised by the calmness in her tone. For what? He asked, genuinely confused. For saving me, Elira replied, her gaze still fixed on the stars. You didn't have to. You could have left me behind. But you didn't. Ryan shook his head. I couldn't leave you, he said simply. You're not just some alien I'm supposed to protect. You're a person. And I wasn't going to leave you to die in there. Elira turned to face him, her orange eyes reflecting the soft glow of the stars outside. I don't know what to say, she murmured. I didn't expect this. You humans are strange. You act without thinking, without hesitation. Ryan's expression softened. It's not that complicated. You were in trouble, and I did what anyone would do. Elira's lips curved into a faint smile. Maybe. But not everyone would risk their life for someone they barely know. Ryan hesitated for a moment before responding. I guess I'm not like most people. Elira's smile deepened, her eyes glimmering with a mix of admiration and curiosity. I'm beginning to see that, she said, her voice quiet but filled with a warmth that Ryan hadn't expected. They both fell into silence again, but this time, it was comfortable. Ryan leaned back in his seat, staring out the window at the endless expanse of space. The quiet hum of the pod's engines was the only sound, a constant reminder of how small they were in the grand scheme of things. Elira's words lingered in his mind. Maybe he wasn't like most people. Maybe there was something about him, something different, that had made him act the way he did. He wasn't sure what it was, but he couldn't deny that something had shifted in him since meeting Elira. He'd always been a soldier, a man of duty and discipline, but now, he felt something more. Something deeper. Elira shifted slightly in her seat, breaking his train of thought. We're almost there, she said, her voice filled with a new sense of purpose. Ryan nodded, his eyes still on the stars. Where are we going? He asked. A place where we can regroup, she replied. And where I can answer some of your questions. Ryan raised an eyebrow. Questions? What kind of questions? Elira's gaze met his, her expression serious now. The kind about me. About my people. About why you're really here. Ryan felt a jolt of surprise, but he quickly masked it. All right, he said, his voice steady. I'm listening. Elira's expression softened, but her eyes held a knowing glint. I know you have questions. I've seen the way you look at me, the way you wonder. But the answers aren't simple. Ryan nodded slowly. I didn't think they would be. The pod continued its steady journey through the void, the silence between them no longer uncomfortable but filled with the weight of unspoken thoughts. Elira was right. He did have questions about her, about the station, and about what the future held for both of them. But he knew they weren't going to be answered easily. As the pod sailed through the stars, Ryan felt the tension of their ordeal start to ease. They weren't safe yet, but for the first time in what felt like forever, he allowed himself to relax just a little. They had made it out alive. And that, for now, was enough. As the escape pod continued its steady journey through the vastness of space, Ryan sat silently, lost in thought. The sound of the engines, now a constant hum in the background, was strangely soothing, but his mind kept returning to the uncertainty that lay ahead. Elira, on the other hand, seemed calm, her eyes focused on the distant stars outside the window. Despite the close call they had just survived, she appeared composed, almost as though she had accepted the chaos as part of her reality. Ryan couldn't help but admire her resilience. He turned his head to look at her, his curiosity about her growing with each passing moment. Elira, he began, his voice breaking the silence. Why were you on that station? What were you doing there? Elira glanced over at him, her expression thoughtful for a moment before she replied. I was part of a diplomatic mission. My people, my species, have been working to establish better relations with other worlds. The station was supposed to be a neutral ground, a place where we could discuss terms with the other factions. But something went wrong. Ryan frowned, sensing there was more to the story. What went wrong? He pressed. Elira hesitated, as if weighing how much to reveal. There was a betrayal, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Someone on that station had their own agenda. They sabotaged the systems, caused the malfunction that nearly destroyed everything. Ryan's mind raced as he processed her words. Do you know who did it? Elira shook her head slowly. Not yet. But I have my suspicions. Ryan's curiosity only deepened, but he knew pressing her further wouldn't help. She had already given him more than he expected. And now, he asked. What happens next? Elira's eyes drifted back to the window, her gaze distant. Now we find out who is behind this. And we make sure they don't do it again. Ryan nodded, his mind made up. He had no idea what kind of trouble they were heading into, but one thing was certain, he wasn't leaving her side. I'm with you, he said firmly, his voice resolute. Whatever it takes. Elira's expression softened, and for the first time since their escape, she seemed to relax slightly. Thank you, she said quietly, almost to herself. I don't know what I would have done without you. Ryan smiled, though there was no lightness in it. We're in this together. We get through it, or we don't. But I'm not backing out now. The two of them sat in silence for a while, the weight of their situation hanging in the air. Ryan's thoughts began to shift from their immediate survival to the bigger picture. There was still so much they didn't know. Who was behind the sabotage? What was their endgame? And how did it all connect to the strange events he had witnessed with Elira? He didn't know the answers, but he intended to find them. Elira broke the silence again, her voice low but steady. We'll need to contact my people. They'll want to know what happened, and they'll need to start preparing for what's coming. Ryan nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. You think this is just the beginning, don't you? He asked, his tone quiet. Elira met his gaze, her eyes serious. I know it is. Ryan's heart skipped a beat. They were both heading into uncharted territory, a situation that could change everything. But as he looked at Elira, her determination lighting up the room, he felt a sense of resolve settle over him. They would face whatever came next, together. The escape pod continued its journey through the stars, carrying them toward a future neither of them could predict, but one thing was certain, they would survive. They had to. And together, they would uncover the truth behind the chaos that had shattered their lives. The pod glided through space, its path steady, but the weight of the situation settled deeper into Ryan's mind. The stars outside were distant. Pinpricks in the vast emptiness, each one a reminder of just how small they were in the grand scheme of things. His eyes flicked to Elira, who sat quietly, her gaze fixed on the small screen in front of her. The silence between them was comfortable, but it was thick with unsaid words. Ryan's thoughts kept drifting back to the station. The sabotage, the collapse, the chaos. And now, Elira's cryptic words about what was to come. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the verge of something much bigger than either of them could fully understand. You said we need to contact your people, Ryan said, breaking the silence. Elira glanced at him, her expression unreadable for a moment before she nodded. Yes, she replied quietly. I need to inform them about the situation. The sabotage. The station. And everything else that's happened. Ryan's brow furrowed slightly. Do you think they know what's going on? Do they have any idea who's behind it? Elira hesitated, her fingers tapping lightly on the console in front of her. I don't know. But I can't risk waiting any longer. If this is part of a bigger plan, my people need to be prepared. We don't know how far this goes, or how many other stations or colonies could be targeted. Ryan's eyes narrowed slightly, his mind processing her words. So, this is just the beginning? You think more is coming? I'm certain of it, Elira said firmly. This isn't an isolated event. There's someone pulling the strings, someone who wants to destabilize everything we've been building. We need to find out who before it's too late. Ryan took a deep breath, his mind racing with the possibilities. He had signed up for a lot when he joined the security team, but this was beyond anything he had expected. A threat that reached beyond the station, beyond even what he could see. He turned to Elira, his expression serious. "I'll help you, Elira. Whatever it takes, we'll figure this out." Elira looked at him, her gaze softening for a moment. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice filled with a gratitude that Ryan hadn't expected. "But we'll need to be careful. Whoever is behind this will likely come after us. We can't trust anyone right now." Ryan nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "I understand. We'll have to keep a low profile for now." Elira's fingers moved quickly over the console again, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the screen. "I'm going to send a secure message to my people," she said. "It's the only way to make sure they know what's going on without alerting the wrong people." Ryan leaned back in his seat, his eyes scanning the endless expanse of space outside the pod. There was still so much they didn't know. But for now, all they could do was keep moving forward, one step at a time. Elira's voice broke through his thoughts. "Message sent," she said. "Now we wait." Ryan nodded. They would wait. But as he sat there, staring into the void, he couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. They were on the edge of something massive, and no matter how prepared they were, it wouldn't be enough to stop it. Not if they didn't find out who was behind it all, and fast. The silence in the pod was almost suffocating as Ryan and Elira waited, the only sound the soft hum of the engines propelling them through the cold vacuum of space. Ryan's mind raced, each thought a flurry of questions. They had just sent the message to Elira's people, but there was no guarantee of a quick response, or any response at all. They had no idea who they could trust, and the only thing they could do now was wait. But waiting was the hardest part. The stars outside the pod flickered, tiny points of light in the endless dark, offering no comfort, no answers. Ryan leaned back in his seat, rubbing his face in frustration. It felt like they were suspended in time, not knowing if they were moving toward salvation or toward something worse. Elira remained quiet beside him, her focus still on the console in front of her, but Ryan could see the tension in her posture. She, too, was feeling the weight of their situation. Finally, Elira broke the silence, her voice steady but tinged with concern. "They should have received the message by now," she said. "We'll know soon enough if they're going to respond." Ryan nodded, though he wasn't sure what the response would mean. The more he thought about it, the more questions arose. Who was behind the sabotage? Was it a lone actor, or a larger organization? And why had they targeted Elira's mission, in particular? What do we do if they don't respond? Ryan asked, his voice low. Elira turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "We keep moving forward," she said simply. "If they don't respond, we'll have to take matters into our own hands. There's no other choice." Ryan felt a knot form in his stomach. The idea of going rogue, without any backup or guidance, was daunting. But Elira was right. They had no other choice. The silence between them stretched again, heavier this time. The pod drifted through the dark expanse, and Ryan's mind wandered. It was strange to think that just days ago, he had been a simple soldier, following orders and doing his job. Now, everything had changed. The lines between right and wrong, loyalty and betrayal, were all beginning to blur. He wasn't sure anymore who the real enemy was. As if sensing his thoughts, Elira spoke again, her voice soft but firm. "I know this isn't what you signed up for, Ryan," she said. "But you've helped me more than I could ever repay. You've saved my life. And now, we need to save everyone else from whatever is coming." Ryan turned to her, the sincerity in her words hitting him harder than he expected. "I didn't do it for any reward," he replied. "I did it because it was the right thing to do." Elira met his gaze, her eyes steady and full of gratitude. "And that's why I trust you," she said simply. Ryan felt something shift in him at her words. Trust. It was something he had always struggled with, especially in his line of work. But somehow, in this moment, it felt easier. "We're in this together," he said, more to himself than to her. Elira nodded, her expression softening. Together, she agreed. They sat in silence for a while longer, both lost in their thoughts, until the console in front of Elira beeped. She immediately turned her attention to it, her fingers flying over the controls as she read the incoming message. Ryan watched her closely, his heart racing with anticipation. Finally, Elira looked up, her face tense. "It's them," she said quietly. "They've received the message." "But?" Ryan leaned forward, his breath catching in his throat. "But what?" Elira's eyes met his, and for a moment, there was a flicker of hesitation in her expression. "They say they're aware of the situation. But they need time to investigate. They don't have all the information yet." Ryan felt his stomach drop. Time. That was the one thing they didn't have. "How much time?" he asked urgently. "They didn't specify," Elira replied, her voice strained. "But they said they're sending reinforcements. It's just going to take longer than we expected." Ryan clenched his fists, his mind racing with the implications. "We don't have that much time," he muttered. "We need to take action now." Elira looked at him, her face resolute. "I know," she said softly. "But we're not alone in this. We just have to be patient a little longer." Ryan didn't know if he could be patient. He wasn't sure how much longer he could sit here, waiting for someone else to act. But Elira's words resonated in him. They weren't alone. They were in this together. And that, for now, was enough.